Thanks for joining today. This is the hearing before the Regulatory Affairs and Federal Management Subcommittee, Modernizing Telework, a review of the private sector telework practices during COVID-19. Good afternoon to everyone. In 1990, Congress passed its first piece of legislation directly related to an employee's ability to be able to work outside of their assigned duty station. Most recent significant legislation affecting the federal workforce and teleworking was the Telework Enhancement Act of 2010, which set the current standards for federal workforce requirements for teleworking. So many changes in the world over the last 10 years, or in the case of just 2020, so many changes, period, this year. It makes sense to be able to take a look at the current telework practices to see what's working, what is not working for the federal workforce, to be able to learn the lessons of what's happening in the private sector. We have a responsibility to ensure federal workforce strategies are relevant, cost effective, and well thought out. Even before this pandemic, many private sector companies were giving remote work flexibility to their employees. The Society for Human Resource Management reported a threefold increase in the number of companies offering remote work options between 1996 and 2016. Obviously, that's accelerated dramatically since then. OPM reported that in 2018, only 22% of the federal workforce was eligible to telework. With the March transition to maximum telework impacting many of these positions not traditionally considered telework eligible, we need to reevaluate eligibility and how this is determined. Clearly, we have more than 22% of our federal workforce that's actually teleworking now. Since March of this year, both the federal workforce and many in private industry have been forced into a new remote work-centric reality. Almost overnight, federal agencies and private companies were forced to deal with complex problems like cybersecurity, remote performance management, employee engagement, hiring, all these on a very grand scale. Pandemic's been a great disruptor, but it also shines a light on broken processes and shows an opportunity for real improvement. There's some very important telework questions that I believe we need clarity on in order to chart a clear path forward for the federal workforce. For example, how do we best prepare employees so that during a future disaster or pandemic, we can seamlessly transition to a federal workforce posture? How do we effectively train managers to stay engaged and to monitor the performance of a remote workforce? I want to make sure cybersecurity threats are seriously considered and telework policy conversations are protected. Being good stewards of American tax dollars, something I talk about often. I believe future cost savings from reduction in needed office space could be a key component to improving remote work opportunities for federal employees. I want to reinvent the wheel. So today we will start a series of federal workforce related telework hearings by first reaching out to some individuals in the private industry to see what they have learned. Those outside federal service understand very clearly that creating efficient cost savings workforce strategies are less a luxury and more of a necessity. I want to thank this panel for taking time away from their business and their very busy schedules. We really appreciate the opportunity to be able to hear about your views on telework and the lessons that you've learned. With that, I'd like to recognize Ranking Member Sinema for her opening remarks.